Choosing the right coil can make all the difference in the world when you're out hunting with a metal detector. Hey, I'm Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and today I'm going to do a video on choosing the right coil. And like I say, it's critically important, and understanding what coils do, because if you don't know what they do and how they work, you can't really understand and choose the right one, right? Now, a while back, recently, I had a discussion with Kevin Hoagland from GPAA about choosing the right coil and how that affects your metal detecting for nuggets. And now Kevin, for you, those of you who don't know him, he's with the GPAA, the Gold Prospectors Association of America, but he worked for a bunch of years for Mine Lab and was involved with Mine Lab. And he used to run a metal detector. He had a metal detecting and a prospecting store of his own in Arizona that he sold product out of. And so Kevin has been involved with a lot of testing of new metal detectors, and he's very qualified to talk about choosing the right coil. And we had a great discussion, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So let's jump in.
Chris, how are you? It has been a very long time, my friend.
It's been a while. Yeah, I know. Hey, I'm doing great. I'm wishing for the cold, snowy weather to end and warm up a little bit up here in the north so that I can get out and do some metal detecting.
It seems like everywhere it has been a little bit of a craziness. Yeah, Chris, there seems to be some really weird weather going on everywhere. And I don't know. Kevin and I were discussing this, and he called me one day to say that Highway 99 had been closed in both directions because of the flooding. And man, that fired off everything about getting out there, looking at things now and doing whatever visual prospecting you could do and still staying safe.
I'm doing most of my visual prospecting now on Google Earth because things that I would like to look at are buried in snow. We had a 36-car pile up here just south of Reno the other day, all on ice, people driving too fast, and suddenly everybody spins out of control, and 36 cars.
It's so sad. It's so sad. People need to learn now. That's a whole other subject. That's a whole I think that's actually a different podcast. So hey, Chris, what do you want to talk about today? It's been a long time. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to throw this out to you. Let's talk about whatever you want to talk about.
One of the things that I want to talk about is, last year when the weather was still decent, I went out with a buddy and we did some metal detecting, and we found a little section along a ravine. There was some flat ground there, and I took out 4 or 5 pieces that I think the largest one was a little over 2 pennyweight, but there were several grammars and between gram and 2 pennyweight. So, and then he went through there and actually went a little upstream from me, but not that far, and got a 1/2 ouncer.
Oh,
and,
nice.
And it was a real slug too. It had like pretty much zero character. But anyway, I got to thinking about that because at the time I went carefully over the ground. We were using the Gold Monster 1000 with the larger coil, and got to thinking after I got back, it's like, hey, that ground is deep. Some of that ground is 2-3 feet down to the bedrock, and it's a ravine, so it's washed. It's not the side of a hill, and I should have put on a bigger coil. And so I'm going to go back. In fact, this time I'm going to take the 7000 and put on a big coil and troll deep, because if there's 1/2 1/4 ounces and even a couple pennyweighters, I'll see that stuff down a ways. And coils, the detector too, obviously, but coils can make such a huge difference in how deep your detector can see.
I absolutely agree. And I've said this for years and years and years. Whenever you swap out a coil on a machine, it's like going back to the vehicle, going back to your truck and grabbing a completely different detector. It is that important to be able to understand and know exactly what you're doing with your coils and how your coils are working for you, and really how coils work, to me.
Yeah, and of course, different styles of coil, even with the same size range, can have different performance. As opposed to like a double D that has more of a blade shaped sensitivity pattern versus a monocoil that has a more of a cone shaped pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And and then of course, some shapes of coils have a better resistance to hot rocks and that sort of thing, and then other coils. But some coils are more sensitive to really small gold, and so understanding your coils or the availability of what your accessory coils could do or set up for, it can make a huge difference to whether you're successful finding gold or not.
Absolutely, it is. It is a major factor, and and there's so many things. A lot of people just go out and they buy coils because somebody's using this coil and they figure that that's going to be the best coil for them. So they buy that coil and they do this and they do that. And I remember once when I was working for Mind Lab, we were having this long conversation, and it was so funny because Doc, it was one of the Mind Lab training, one of the Mind Lab training things, and Doc was there, and he and I were bantering back and forth, which is what you end up doing with Doc no matter what. But there was a gentleman that was sitting there, a dealer that was sitting there, and we started talking about how all coils are actually measured. And it doesn't matter if it's an elliptical or even a square coil or whatever, on actually knowing the sizes of the coils and things that you're getting. And Doc popped up because at that time he was working very heavily with Coil Tech, and he popped up and it was something that I guess he and I knew and a lot of other people didn't, is that all coils are measured off of a round coil. So it doesn't matter if you've got a 11 by 9 elliptical coil. It's all basically done off of a round coil as far as the design is concerned. And that was, I was kind of surprised at the number of people that were sitting in that group that were just shocked by that. So, of course, I had to give the absolutely complicated mathematical procedure to figure out what size coil you actually have. And, of course, Doc had to jump in the middle of that one, and that created a good laugh for about an hour. But when you think about it and you're looking at a coil, if you've got an elliptical coil that's 11 by 9, what you do is you take and I know you know this, but this is for everybody watching. You take the length of the coil and the width of the coil, and you add it together. So an 11 by 9 is 20 inch. And now you take that and you divide it in half, and that's 10 inch. And what you have is basically the 10 inch coil, is the way that coil properly works.
Right.
So, that's a big thing to think about when you're thinking about coils, because I don't buy a coil and I don't use a coil unless I'm going to get at least a 30% difference, because I can make adjustments with the machine that will attack some of that. And but as far as like just really drilling down on the coil, if I can't get a 30% increase in depth or sensitivity or something out of that, it's not worth it. And this poor guy sitting in the back, he just started shaking his head, and I looked at him and said, what's the problem? I just measured out all my coils in my head, and I've got like 9 11-inch coils. So
yeah, but there is an advantage to oval coils in the sense that if you have like a 14 by 10 or something like that, you're right, that's the equivalent of a 12-inch coil. But when you're sweeping over the ground, you're getting a 14-inch stroke and not a 10 or 12-inch stroke. And so, longer coils cover more ground, and essentially you have to overlap a little less, because when you're swinging coils and you're in gold area, you need to overlap your ground, otherwise you're going to miss, because the deepest penetration is at the center of the coil, not at the edges. So you got to overlap some, but if you have an oval coil, you can maybe overlap a little bit less, cover a little bit more ground, and hopefully find a little more gold.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many manufacturers that do come out with round coils as their factory coils and so on like that. But I got to tell you, anytime that I can get an elliptical coil, just for that reason, because you do have that area, you've got that extended area. And even though, even if you're saying it's a 10-inch coil, but if it's out here, you've got that extra area. Your overlap becomes less, but you still have to overlap. And I think that's the biggest failure of people out there running either concentric coils on VLF detectors or monocoils on PI machines is their overlap. They're not overlapping properly. So, and I think I talked about this in that video that I did. If I've got two V's and this is where I'm overlapping, if I have a target right in here, unless there's unless there's a little bit of residual energy, which if you're in really bad ground, there will not be any residual energy that could go across into that. You just walked over something. And that probably attests for 90% of the nuggets that somebody walks behind somebody else and finds is that just poor coil management, really poor coil management.
The other advantage for oval coils is sticking it in between rocks or between bushes or stuff like that. It's easier to get it in there and cover some. This is another area that people don't often detect. You can go to an area that's just been beat to heck, and then all the gold's been taken, but between the bushes or next to the rocks or something like that, you might get a signal that's a nice nugget.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And someday when you're in Arizona, I'm going to take you up to an old patch that we hunted for, there's 4 or 5 of us that hunted this thing for years. And the first thing that we did was go around and go under every bush. Every bush, we cleared out the areas. We put on whatever coils we needed to or what made it the very best for getting into those areas. And we went in, we worked under all of the brush first, and then we started working the open areas, and we were raking all the material, all the larger rock and everything, raking that back underneath the brush because we'd already hunted under the brush and we raked all that area. So people stumbling onto that area, I've had people that have talked about it. They had no idea what they were looking at, but they were making a remark about they saw this place and there was no rock over an inch big. Yet underneath the bushes, there was, just massive amounts of rock packed up underneath there. And that was a great patch. I haven't been back there with any of the newer machines though.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
I'm hoping to make it next year. Hoping to kind of do a combination trip to see the Tucson Gem Show, which is something that fascinates me, all the minerals and stuff. And then maybe do some detecting, perhaps with you, perhaps with Bill Southern, some of the other guys I know down there.
Yeah. I'd love to just put together a weekend or something where a bunch of us just get out and go out and pound some ground.
Sounds great to me.
I want to so badly. You know what? I'm not even going to talk about it. There's a T-shirt that I've wanted to make again for years and years and years, and it was done. I don't even remember when it was done, but it was a tour T-shirt, and there a few people are going to watch this and understand it. So, coils. Gosh, I mean, there's so many choices. There's so many things. There's so many mistakes that people make, and I hate to say it like that. And I'm not trying to beat up on anybody, but I've watched people. As you know, I'm not the biggest fan of double D coils. I'm not. Actually, I should say I wasn't the biggest fan of double D coils, but I've always I can feel that loss. I can feel that loss in just the response in my ears of the depth that I'm losing. And even though I can work a double D coil in some of the worst ground, actually I've gotten into areas where I never thought that I would be able to hunt anything, and gone in with double Ds and just really run the machine and really adjusted the machine to run right on the ragged edge, and been pretty successful, been really successful. But it's you can't just throw a coil on and expect it to do everything. You have to understand exactly what the parameters are of that coil. And I'm not ever going to say go easy. I mean, to me, it's all about putting your detector onto the absolute ragged edge and having the right coil, whether it's a mono, if you're talking pulse induction, whether it's a mono or a double D. That to me is probably the most important part of all of that.
Everything is a trade-off. You know, whether the coil choice you make, the detector choice you make, there's advantages and disadvantages, and it's all a trade-off. And you got to understand the trade-offs you're making. You can't just say, well, you know, mono always gets the greatest depth, so that's all I'm using.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're not going to get any discrimination with a monocoil. That's another thing you won't get. And so, and even though, you know, there's issues with discrimination on pulse induction machines, you know, it's still a consideration.
I agree. And you're absolutely right when you say the trade-off. There is, you know, people ask me how long when will I run a monocoil, and I just tell them until I can't run it anymore. When it gets to that point where I can't run a mono anymore, then I will switch to the double D. In the past, it's been very reluctant. I've tried to make adjustments to the machine first before doing that. And you know, that's another important part about knowing everything there is to know about your detector and really just settling in with it. But yeah, I mean, coils are such a big subject. I actually could turn this thing into probably more time than you and I, either one of us, have, and really just do a lot of drill down. I'm just trying to think of I did that video at a 30,000 foot view, which I felt more was like a 60,000 foot view to some extent. But you know, just because somebody's got a brand new coil that comes into the marketplace, is it the right coil for you? Is it really what you need? And I don't know. I saw a guy last weekend when I got back from California, and he was showing me all these coils that he had, and he'd been using all of them poorly, I guess is the easiest way to say it. And he had a couple of $1,000s worth of coils, which is not hard to do in this day and age, but he didn't know his machine real well, and he definitely didn't know the coils that he was using, so it was pretty much a waste of that money. And I spent about 3 hours with him, just really working with him to help him understand what it was that he was really doing and what he was really looking at, and what the advantages and disadvantages are. So I don't know, man.
I think having some accessory coils, though, is good. It basically does expand the capabilities of your machine. And getting back to, like I say, the thing that made me think of coils to begin with is, you know, I went over an area where we picked out some very nice nuggets, fairly shallow. I mean, the grammars and penny waders that I was getting were 5-6 inches deep. And I don't think that the half ounce that my friend got was much deeper than that, maybe 6 or. And yet you could see from the creek that the soil there was 2, maybe even 3 feet deep. And so you know that even with the larger coil on the Gold Monster, I'm not getting 2 or 3 feet deep. That's country that's produced 10+ ounce nuggets.
Oh,
big stuff. And so if there's big stuff there and it's down on the bedrock, you know, you're not going to see it with a small coil.
No, absolutely not. The physics of a coil are limited, and you know, if you've got a 10-inch coil and you're trying to find a target, and sometimes a lot of it's dependent upon the ground mineralization. I hunt an area frequently where 11-inch coil, I'm lucky if I get 6 to 8 inches of depth just because of the way the mineralization is.
Right.
And then come back in. But in an area like what you're talking about, that's just absolutely, I mean, things like that, you've got to understand the area and what you're really dealing with. And, you know, your process of saying, okay, well, there's good gold here. We pulled out some really good gold, but did we really get what we can? So new machine, different coil, all these other
coil.
things. Yeah, bigger coil.
Yeah.
What machine are you going to go back to that area with? You're going to go back with the 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
You have
and I have the big coil, but I'm probably just going to stick with the standard one. I'm probably just going to stick with the standard. I've dug nuggets 18 inches with this, and the nugget I dug with at 18 inches with the 7,000 was a wire gold specimen. It wasn't even a solid. It was just a mesh of wires. And I dug it at 18 inches. And it was not a quiet signal. It wasn't a screamer at the surface, but it wasn't something you'd accidentally miss. So
that's impressive.
Yeah, no, it's an impressive machine that goes deep. And the nuggets at this place are quite solid. I've seen some of the big stuff. The guy that I've gone with has found a 9-ouncer in that general vicinity. So it's worth going after with it. Another machine with a bigger coil that sees deeper, and hopefully will find me some good gold.
You're going to find some bigger gold. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Even if I just go out and find a couple of 2-3 penny waders, I'll be plenty happy with that.
Sure.
But there's potential for big multi-ounce stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you go back out there and you find a few more penny waders that are an inch further than what you were able to get with your original machine and the 10-inch coil on the Gold Monster, then that's a win no matter what. That's a win. So let's talk about.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, sometimes guys spend a lot of money on a machine and they just don't think about accessory coils enough. And so it's something that should be a serious consideration.
Accessory coils, different manufacturers. Everybody has a little bit different way of winding. Everybody has a little bit different way of doing things as far as their accessory coils, including the manufacturers. And I am an absolute big fan of making sure that I've got coils for whatever machine that I'm using. And I love it when the manufacturer comes out with a lot of good coils. And I'll use MindLab as an example. Most of the time, MindLab, when they introduce a machine, they've got a lot of different coils that they come up with. And of course, other manufacturers follow very, very quickly. I'm really impressed with the line of coils that Garrett came out with for the Axiom. And it's an incredibly impressive line of coils. The only thing I'm hoping for is maybe an 8-inch mono, or even something maybe even a little bit smaller, like the old Coiltech little Joey. I would love to have something like that for the Axiom. What are your thoughts on that?
The small coil is not that big. It's pretty small. And actually, that's the coil I've used on the Axiom the most, is that smaller coil. And so I've been real happy with it. The mono version.
Right, the 11-inch mono?
Right.
Yeah. That started out as being my very favorite coil. It really did. And then I went to the 13-inch mono. And man, I got to tell you, I actually feel like that 13-inch mono is doing a better job than the 11-inch mono. But do I leave the house with just the 13-inch mono? Never. I may dedicate myself only to hunt with the 13-inch as I get to know it better, but I don't leave the house without the 11-inch. So I will go back and forth on those. You know what? I think we just kind of scratched the surface. I believe that there is a whole lot more that we can really talk about coils, as far as the VLF coils, the concentric coil that is the send and receive. There's so much that you can do with that send and receive coil, that concentric coil, but because it's based on a singular sine wave of just that singular sine wave going down, and then that return coil bringing the signal back. There are a lot of things that you can really do to super tune a machine based upon those coils. And a lot of people don't realize that. They don't realize that, you can tune to the coil along with tuning your machine to the ground. And there's a lot of just really cool things that you can do there. The monocoils for pulse induction machines, again, one of my favorites. It hasn't been till lately that I've really embraced hunting with the double D. And it's not because I'm getting lazy. It's just that double Ds have gotten better, truly have gotten better over the last few years. Any thoughts on double D?
Yeah, no, the double D coils are handy. I mean, I use all my coils at one time or another. There's certainly cases where you have screaming hot rocks, a lot of them that I've used the double D to quiet down the bulk of the hot rocks and work with. So, I've used my double D that way to shut up the majority of the hot rocks, and yet be able to still run the thing at a fairly high gain setting. So there's place for all those coils. I mean, the manufacturers make all these different coils. There's a place for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I always take multiple ones out in the field, like you mentioned, because there's sometimes when I get out in the field and decide, you know what, I want to change coils because I want to do this or I want to do that with my machine. And it really gives you the flexibility, almost like you have a different machine when you change the coil.
Yeah, I truly agree with that. And that's really not much more to say as far as that's concerned, because as you just said it, I've said it in the past, you go to the truck, you grab another coil, you come back out, you've got a different machine.
Yep.
And you need to set that machine up accordingly to the coil that you just installed. And another big miss. And I hate to see people that go to the truck, they put on a different coil, they come back, they just run the machine exactly how they were running it before, which to me is a huge mistake. Okay, so monocoil, double D coil,
Concentrics.
Concentric coils, and then you look at some of those weird coils like what D-Tech used to build. I don't know if you ever saw the insides of a D-Tech. It was two big circles that didn't connect, and then a big circle at the top and a small circle at the bottom. So you actually had 4 coils all wrapped up inside of one of these things. I still don't know what it was used for. It was a coin and relic. It was a coin and relic machine, but when I cut that coil apart, I just looked at it and went, why?
Well, then there's also the Bigfoot. Have you seen those? The real long coils.
The Jimmy Sierra Bigfoot, man. Oh, I'll tell you what, I ran a Jimmy Sierra Bigfoot on my very first GMT, or I'm sorry, I can't even call it GMT, all the way back to the Goldmaster when that first came out. And man, I got to tell you, I love that coil. I absolutely love that Bigfoot coil. But yeah, and then of course the coil that I built, which was a pizza box. I built a pizza box because everybody's ranting and raving about coils, so I wound a coil inside of a pizza box and put it in on epoxy. By the time I got done, it still had the pizza box on it, and you could open it up and see the coil wiring in it. But yeah, that was a great coil. Problem is, it weighed about as much as a spare tire for a truck. It was heavy with all the epoxy. But
there's the really huge coils, the 4x2 foot and some of the really giant ones. When I was in Australia, we had a guy that we were with that was running one of those 4x2s. He had it mounted crossways behind his ATV, and he would drive along with a box, and he could connect it, and he had filters so that the motor wouldn't cause problems with the coil. And he ran across, and he'd go with his headphones on. And one time I was with him, I was actually sitting on the back of the thing, and he was running along and going out, and he got a signal so loud I could hear it. He had his headphones on. I could hear it sitting behind him, and he slams on the brakes, and we run back there, and he had the regular detector that was set up, and he starts looking around. We found the target. It was a bolt that fell off his bike. So it was a good sized bolt. It just something fell off, and then the thing ran over it, and of course it screamed. It was right on the surface, and but anyway, it was a funny story. And he said though he's run around like that and found some really nice gold. Not very often, but he says when you do find some, it's really good.
Sure.
So there's even a place for that crazy large stuff that you can't really hold on the end of your metal detector.
Yeah, yeah. The biggest coil I've ever seen was that 6-foot coil tech that Trevor built for that special. I think it was for just a customer, where the guy had it on a hand trolley. Did you ever see the pictures of that?
I saw
coil?
pictures of that.
Yeah, on a hand trolley with a 2200. I would have loved to have seen that coil in person. I would have loved the guys out there with bicycle tires and pushing it across, just pushing it across the flats and getting signals. I can you imagine that was on a 2200? Could you imagine having a 6-foot coil on a 7000?
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to dig holes that deep.
No, that's an NOI level coil. You've got a notice intent on your claim because you're going to dig every target with a backhoe. But
I dug a bolt once at 3 foot with my 7000, and it pretty much took the wind out of me for about a half a day.
Sure.
That hole.
But didn't it make you feel good?
Oh, I thought for sure it's down so deep. There's no way this could be a piece of trash. Sorry, it was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anyway, coils are a great thing, and anybody that runs a metal detector and wants to look for nuggets, it's something that you really need to think about and have as an arrow in your quiver, just in case you need to do something different.
Yep. And you know what? I think I want to readdress this later on in a different podcast, but what I'd really like to do is talk about some of I'd like to get into a conversation with you, because you've been running the Garrett Axiom for a while. I've been running the Garrett Axiom for a while. And I'd like to just swap stories and ideas and thoughts on the Axiom, including this new coil design that Garrett came up with as far with the ring on their double D coil. I'm pretty impressed with that.
It's a different design.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different design, and I wasn't sure that I was going to embrace it, but now it's kind of it's interesting because it absolutely does serve a purpose, just like every other coil. But that's a discussion for the Axiom.
Yeah.
All right, gang. You know what?
Let's have another podcast. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, let's have another podcast. We'll talk about that one. So, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us. It's been a while. Thanks for the new lead-in, all the other stuff. Chris, it's always a pleasure. It's been way too long. I hope to get this thing back up and running and really getting a lot of legs behind it and being able to do some things. And as always, I would truly appreciate it if you'd like to be a part of it. And it's your expertise is you've helped more people than you know during our podcast. And it's great. It's absolutely great. So that's an open-ended invitation, but
you betcha. I accept.
All right. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Have fun. All that other good stuff. And we'll see you the next time.
Now, after watching that, I'm sure you guys realize how important the choice of coil is, but also understanding prospecting and where the gold is also the most important of all. Now, I wrote a book about prospecting. It's an encyclopedia, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book that's called Fistful of Gold right now. So let me tell you a little bit more about my book. It's called Fistful of Gold, and I wrote it because I want you to be able to go out and find for yourself Fistful of Gold. And you can see that it's an encyclopedia with all kinds of information, pictures, and that sort of thing. It's not in color, but color would have cost me a lot more to have printed, and so the book would have cost a lot more. It's for sale on Amazon, and you can pick it up. I'll put a link in the description below. Also, I have a website, and the website is at NevadaOutbackGems.com. I'll put a link for it in the description below, but there's gobs of information there that you will find useful in your prospecting efforts. Finally, I want to say that I really appreciate your comments and thoughts and even positive criticism. Don't come on there and just toss out insults, because I'll just delete your comments. But if you've got helpful things to say and questions to ask, do write and put those in the comments, because I answer my comments to people, and you'll hear from me in responding to you. So if you've enjoyed this video and you like what you see and you're interested in finding out more, well then sign up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so they'll let you know when I post new videos. And like it and share it if again you see stuff that you really are excited about. And I'll be coming out with lots more new videos, and so we'll see you again real soon.